I am gonna go back.
Jim, you should have that. Okay. Did it come over? Okay. Good. Yes. Yeah. But not today. That's right. Email commit.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our August 18th board meeting. Will everyone please rise to pledge the flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mr. Acker.
Here.
Mr. Azar.
Here.
Dr. Cadman. Here. Mr. Fleming.
Here.
Mr. Medensky.
Here.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Here.
Mr. Robeson.
Here.
Mrs. Tierney. Here. Mrs. Pashowski.
Here.
All present.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have the superintendent report prior to approving the agenda and the event. New agenda items come up from the superintendent.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Pashowski. I want to begin very briefly by quickly noting that my resignation is on the agenda tonight. And I wanted to begin my superintendent's report by offering my most sincere gratitude for the privilege of a lifetime to be superintendent in the Abington Heights School District. I'm grateful to the board, to the community, to the tremendous colleagues I've had to work with in the administration, incredible teachers, support staff. This is a fantastic community. And again, it is the privilege of my lifetime to have had the opportunity to work here. And in the words of the social philosopher Forrest Gump, that's all I got to say about that. So moving on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Looking at the 2021 school year in review, thank you. Thank you. Sincerely, thank you. The 2021 school year will begin on September 8th. We're very excited to get started. It is our firmly held commitment to provide in-person instruction through the entire year. Of course, we will comply with all mandates and orders issued during the school year. We hope they are few and far between, and we're hoping actually none at all, but obviously we'll have to compare with them. I thought it might make sense to begin with just a review of some numbers. The first numbers look at increasing incident and positivity rates over the past several weeks. We see on July 15th, we had an incident rate of 16.7 and 1.8 positivity rate. We're now, with the latest data from the Department of Health, up to 52.5 and 4.7. I thought, for just in context, if we look back Last year, we were at 11.4 and 1.5. So actually, we are in a little worse than we were last year at this time as we were heading into the year. And the all-time worst week that we had came in January. Again, just for the sake of comparison, we were all the way up to 376 and 14.2. So when we look back to last year, again, for context, we had mandatory masking. We had mandatory school closures. We all had, remember those texts coming out, we have so many cases of this building or that building, we have to shut down for a while. During the course of the year, and this was significant, we began the year and we were quarantining hundreds and hundreds of students, missing days and days and days of school each. We came to the view toward the end of the year that the students we were quarantining really weren't coming down with the infections that we were concerned about. So we moved to modified quarantine, where in many instances, students who were close contacts in certain circumstances were allowed to remain in school with proper precautions in place. Last year, we were very focused on maximizing social distancing. The board will recall we brought in storage trucks, which remain, and we were pulling out classrooms and trying to have our yardsticks out, distance between desks. So that was a very big thing. We were focused on maximum social distancing. That, of course, had the effect of minimizing interactions among teachers and students. So necessarily, the more we focus on keeping people apart, that limited interactions, including very important educational ones. We had significant effort at contact tracing. We reported instances on our website. We were very, very much involved in trying to understand the extent to which disease was present in our school community, and certainly the extent to which it was transmitted in our buildings. And finally, it's important to recall that staff and students were unvaccinated for most of the year. So that's a quick recap of where we were a year ago. Now, before we begin, I just thought I would throw out, with a year's worth of experience, we would think things would be getting more clear. The reality is there are 19 states that have mandates, and wouldn't you know that 12 are requiring masks, 7 are forbidding them. So there is a profound lack of clarity on this issue. And if you look at the governors of the states, 12 are of one party, 7 are another. So there's been a political component to these discussions that have been going on across the country. So as we look at the 2021-22 school year, there are several things that I want to highlight that are different from last year. Vaccinations, the Delta variant, physical distancing, quarantine, and masking. So I'm going to take just a brief slide on each of those topics. So for vaccinations, we know that large percentages of our staff are vaccinated. We've been having a lot of vaccination clinics. We don't track it, but we just know from experience that many of our staff members took advantage of it. The percent of eligible students vaccinated is unknown. We don't know how many eligible students actually took us up because we do not track whether students are vaccinated or not with respect to COVID. We do know that students under 12 are not vaccinated because they're not eligible at this time. And we do want to emphasize that Admin Heights does not require students or staff to reveal vaccination status. With respect to the Delta variant, the COVID that we're facing in September of 2021 is different than the COVID we were facing in September of 2020. The virus is more contagious than when we started school last year. And this certainly introduces additional uncertainty because this, again, is new. We've not dealt with this before. We've dealt with COVID from last year. We've not dealt with the COVID Delta variant. As far as physical distancing, we are planning to open with a focus on learning and interaction while maintaining physical distance to the extent feasible. That is flipped around from last year, where we opened with the concept of maximum physical distancing, and it had a lesser focus on the actual learning because of the concerns, but we're flipping that around. I'll use the best example. When teaching children to read, Guided reading tables are just known to be extremely valuable. Last year, we took those guided reading tables and we moved them out into trucks. This year, we're bringing them back in because we want a focus to be on education. And we think that's a great value. But the cost of that is less physical distancing among our students as they're participating in these activities. And again, that's one example of many. It's a trade-off that we're focused on as we enter school this year. We are, however, prepared to adopt more rigorous physical distancing requirements should circumstances require. So if we see internal transmission, if we see problems that are occurring, high incident rates in the community, then we are certainly prepared to go back to a greater focus on physical distancing and a smaller focus necessarily on the learning environment. However, mask optional is a greater concern given reduced physical distancing. So as we enter into schools and we have guided reading and we have more engagement with kids, as we have smaller physical distancing, we did all of that last year with masks, all right? To the extent that we're doing that this year with no masks is a difference that is worth considering. Quarantine. Now these are two, the first one is a very important new development. And I have the link here. I'll post this on our website tonight or tomorrow. But the CDC is saying quarantine is not required for students who are wearing their masks. So if we have interaction among elementary students, someone is in contact with somebody for 15 minutes in close contact inside 6 feet, normally they'd be considered a close contact. The CDC is now ruling that that is not a close contact. There will be no need for that individual to quarantine. Similarly, someone who is fully vaccinated is not required to quarantine. As I mentioned earlier, we don't require someone to disclose their vaccination status if they are determined to be a close contact. If they decide voluntarily to disclose their status as being vaccinated, then they are removed from the requirement of quarantine. If they choose not to, which is their right, then quarantining becomes, an issue that we have to consider. So a mask optional approach significantly increases the need to quarantine. So if students are not wearing masks at the elementary, for example, and they are close contacts, then there is a need to quarantine, especially again, among our unvaccinated students. A mask optional approach combined with the Delta variant, reduced physical distancing, and modified quarantine, if we were even to dare go down that road under those circumstances, would be a dramatically different strategy than was taken in 2020, 2021. And so essentially, if that was the road we were to go down, there would be no distinction between COVID and say the flu that we do. And some places are adopting that strategy, but I think given the uncertainty that there's risk involved in that. So moving on now, we do have a decision before us as the school year is approaching. Masking was mandated in 2020, 2021. Universal masking is recommended by just about all the major agencies, CDC, the pediatricians. Geisinger locally had a presentation to the superintendents, all but demanding that masks be used. So the authoritative sources are recommending strongly that we have masking. So the board then is presented with, I think, maybe many options, but I think 3 options kind of summarize where we go. Currently, we are masking optional, so there's no need to act if that is where the board would like to go. We could adopt universal masking K through 12 or universal masking K through 8 with the idea that up until middle school, there are full classes of students who are not eligible for vaccination at this point. And when we do say universal masking, we recognize that is not for when students are outside, obviously not when they're eating lunch. So it would be the same universal masking rules that we would have in place last year, where certainly if they're in their classroom under normal circumstances, they would have to have their mask on. If they needed a break, they could take it off for a short time. But essentially that's the question that is presented to the board tonight. And so I think there would be now an opportunity for for discussion and perhaps opportunity for the board to act. And I'm going to stay here in case someone wants to reference a slide that we saw.
Mike, would it be more appropriate to have public comment first, or the public comment should count on our discussion?
Well,
If
that
we
would be
wanted
for the
add-
board to decide. And the only thought would be, right, if the board wanted to, if the public comment comes up and everybody offers their thoughts on this topic, and then if the board had a motion that they wanted to
Then we'd have to
move
have
forward,
comment on it.
we'd have to have public comment again.
Right.
So perhaps it would be have a motion, discuss it, and if after public comment, the board wants to have an alternate motion or is swayed one way or the other by what the public is saying, they could certainly amend the motion to address it that way.
So no motion is needed if we are not going to make any changes, if we're going to remain
Right.
mask optional.
Status quo is mask optional.
So the real conversation is, are there enough board members that either want to have mask K through 12 or K through
8. Yes.
and making it optional?
That's how I see it, Mrs. Brashowski. Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll go first. So I still get a little bit confused about the masking optional. When we say masking optional, I think my recollection is originally there was a suggestion that vaccinated persons didn't have to wear a mask and that unvaccinated persons should wear a mask. So I'm not thinking that at any point it was really optional for unvaccinated persons. I think it was optional for the vaccinated persons. But that being said, so that term, I'm not really a fan of that term. I am in full support of universal masking K through 12. And I think that for me, I focus on the positives. And the positives are that, we have modified quarantine. Kids are back in school. We're hoping to keep the buildings open. Everybody will be closer together. The social interaction, hopefully will be at least to some degree reinstated. Until there's mandatory vaccinations, more testing options, lower incident rates, not only in our community, but all contiguous counties where our students travel to for extracurricular activities. I know myself, I was in Philadelphia yesterday. I mean, there were notices on several of the buildings I went to that there was an emergency declaration and masks were mandated. So people travel, people come and go, people interact. So it's not only like individuals, it's everybody that everybody is in contact with, that kind of weighs into all of this. And even though our elementary students can't be vaccinated, we don't know or can't ask how many of our high school students and our faculty are vaccinated. So for me, I have to go with the assumption that, there are unvaccinated, unmasked persons in the high school building, which is unsettling to me. So that's going to be my position.
I agree with Mrs. Cadman. I believe that unfortunately, as this Delta variant is coming and stronger, I think Abington Heights needs to be proactive. It is so important that we return to our classrooms in the fall. That is our ultimate goal. We're not offering a virtual classroom. We're offering in-person, the best education that Abington Heights has had and can deliver. And to be proactive, it is important for me to see that I swore on an oath to follow the mission statement of Abington Heights to provide a safe, nurturing environment for all of our students. So I am 100% in favor of making masks K through 12 and any employee or anyone entering one of Abington Heights facilities until we feel comfortable and monitoring this to make sure that we are offering the safest environment for our kids while we are opening the doors and bringing back the education that Abington Heights has. So I'm in favor of universal masking.
Mrs. Prochaska, I think the question is, should we open it up to consider one of the two masking options? And I certainly think we need to do that. I'm not prepared right now to say what my opinion is, but I would certainly like to hear what the board has. I would certainly like to hear what the board's comments are and also the public's before.
Okay, so I think to Dr. Mann's point, if we want to add a motion to the agenda, we would have to, I suppose we could possibly add two motions and have one fail and one pass, but the idea is that we would settle on a motion, add it to the agenda, and then approve the agenda, and then have public comment on the agenda. So if you could, I mean, if you can wait, if you want to have further conversation, but if you have a notion where you would like to go with it, it's one of the three. We state no motion, K through 12, K3.
I agree with both Dr. Cadman and Mrs. Tierney. I think I agree with both Dr. Cadman and Mrs. Tierney. I think that part of our responsibility is to ensure the safety of our students. And I think while masking is difficult, I think it's a small price to pay for.
Closer to the mic, please.
While masking is difficult, I think it is something that it's a small price that we have to pay for the safety of our children.
Where's your mask?
Anybody else?
Take it off this weekend when you went out to eat.
Excuse me, please. That is not how we conduct yourself. When you are given your opportunity to speak, you will be given that opportunity. There is no shouting out. Thank you. Mr. Robeson, would you like to?
Sure. You know, the thing that comes to mind when I think about this subject is the children of 12 years and below are unvaccinated. They don't even have an opportunity to be vaccinated. And the studies are pretty clear, vaccination works. That's my own personal opinion. And those are the facts. So the fact that if you're 12, which is, we're basically talking about middle school and elementary school, that the majority of those children don't have the opportunity to become vaccinated, and the devastating impact quarantines have, because if we don't have masks and we have a higher risk, which we will, I believe, in the elementary and middle schools, that will require more quarantine. And we talked in detail about the negative impacts of quarantine. It's pretty devastating because you get the numbers of people being quarantined rise very, very quickly. So with those two facts, I'm in support of the universal masking for K through 8.
K through 8. Okay. Yep.
Sure, I'll go next. So this is a difficult issue for everybody. No matter what we decide today, there's going to be people that disagree with us. So I know we've all thought about this a lot for the last few weeks. I'm going to zero in on some of the things that my colleagues have already said, and maybe a couple of others. Last year, I'm going to point out something new. So last year, this board certainly decided not to follow the CDC on certain occasions when we felt that that was appropriate for the kids. You know, I only joined the board last year. I can only tell you that the reason why I made that decision last year, which was a very difficult decision to do. I don't like going against anybody's advice that has a lot more experience in healthcare than me. The reason why I did it last year was because I wanted to put the kids' development first. And I felt like their development was being hindered substantially. And I thought it was incumbent on the community to take the risk, to take more risk, so that the kids could continue to be in school in person and to get back to doing activities. And we made that decision as a board, and I think it was the right decision. Before I made that decision last year, I talked to a few dozen healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, executives in my network. Everybody's got their own network. It's certainly not a scientific sampling, but last year, the vast majority of people that I spoke to, certainly not all of them, certainly not unanimous, were in favor of doing that. We're in favor of getting back in school. So in the last few weeks, I did the same thing. I talked to the same network of people that I respect the most. And it was very much not unanimous again. But this year, it was very much in favor of protecting the vulnerable kids that can't get vaccinated yet. And I want to point out that it was by far not unanimous. I just had a conversation a few hours before this board meeting with someone who sits on another board, who is a physician who disagrees that we should be doing that. But I have to listen to the majority of the people that I respect the most. So then the question to me comes to, should we be K through 8 or K through 12? This is a very hard decision also. K through 12, the reason why the CDC, I believe, if you read all of their guidance, is making that guidance, and the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, is because they are concerned about students in high school who are unvaccinated, who we don't know who they are, we don't know what the rates are going to cause community spread. And it's going to eventually find its way to one of the kids that's not vaccinated, that doesn't have the access to the vaccine. That's who they're trying to protect. But in the fine print of the CDC guidance, one of the bullet points talks about if vaccinate, they're specifically giving that guidance because of the possibility that vaccination rates are low in a community. There are many states in this country where vaccination rates are extremely low. And I think that they feel that it's incumbent on them to protect those communities. We live in a community where vaccination rates are very high in the state. We have a staff that is extremely highly vaccinated as a percentage. And for that reason, I'm going to support K through 8, not K through 12, because I don't know what, and I don't like doing that because I have a lot of people that I respect that are telling me not to do that. But the reason why I think we should do that is because I don't know what the trigger is going to be to not have masks be mandatory. To me, I'm not wearing a mask tonight. I'm vaccinated. All right, I'm making that choice for myself. And I wish that I could let everybody in the community make that choice for their kids. But until we protect those kids in a way, until we give the kids the opportunity to be protected, I think that we do have to protect them. So I'm going to vote for K through 8.
Okay, thank you. Greg, did you want to chime in?
I'm just going to be repeating a lot of what everybody else has said. There is this is not an easy decision. There is two sides of the discussion, and you're never going to make a decision, or the decision we make here tonight, there's going to be somebody that disagrees with it and somebody that agrees with it. We have looked at data for how many months? We look at all the different reports that come out to try to make an educated decision, looking at data. And even that is like trying to find the right document that says one way or another. You can find both sides of the story of should we wear a mask, should we not wear a mask, should we get vaccinated, should we not? I look at it this way. Everybody's trying to protect their families, which I think is great, or do the right things for them families. And that's I support that 100%. However, as the board, we have to do it for all the students at Abington Heights, all the teachers, all the administrators. We have to make those decisions for this community. And that's what makes this job very difficult. It's highly contagious, the new variant. And yes, people that are vaccinated can get it. Of course, they don't have the symptoms, but they can carry it. They can give it to someone who's unvaccinated. And I think all of us have been touched by someone who has had it. Hopefully you haven't been touched by someone who has died from it. And knowing that, I look at it, if someone gets sick and gives it to a parent or a grandparent, and they get severely sick and die from it, they would have to bear that, knowing that they possibly gave it to them. And well, to make it a short story, I'm going to support the K through 12 universal masking.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
As everyone has said, it's not an easy decision. When I've thought about this, what I keep focusing on is the safety of our students and our staff and providing the students with the best education that we can. And I know we learned a lot last year. We learned that nothing can replace in-person classroom teaching. With that in mind, I would support K through 12 masking.
Thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Mann first.
Yes.
So however way we vote tonight, how will the masking decision or the masking situation be evaluated and by whom?
Well, first it'll be evaluated by everyone with whom we share data, including the board. So the board will have ample opportunity to see all the information that we are seeing. So ultimately, the evaluator of the data is that of the board. There is not, in my view, a single metric that we can rely upon to say this is being successful or not successful. But I think that what we would do is we will continue to contact tracing and gathering data so that we have this information. And I think we compare what we can ascertain is happening within our building, compare it to what's happening in our community. We certainly look for any acute instances of concern because we do have to take care of those who are least able to fend off a disease or take care of themselves. And so I would say to you that, we've had a year of talking about data and what we look at and the information that we glean. Ultimately, the judge of this is the Board of Education, but certainly administration will be, as we have been, providing the best recommendation we can based upon the information that we have available from the widest array of reliable sources that's available to us, including the local data that we will take pains to collect during this time.
So we meet on regularly every 2 weeks.
We do.
So presumably we'd reassess every 2 weeks.
Well, I think from an administrative point of view, we'll be assessing every day.
Right.
And while the board is regularly scheduled to meet every 2 weeks, the board could meet every night in a week if necessary to manage an emerging circumstance. So, yes.
Okay, so, I understand and appreciate both sides of the argument. It's an impossible decision to make. There's no right answer, I'm afraid. I think we have to err on the side of the most susceptible student in the schools. On the other hand, I do think that, because everyone has the option to get vaccinated if you're over 12 years old, including staff, that, that is, I do think that the need to wear a mask over, the 8th grade should be optional. And so, for those reasons, I'm at this point recommending that we limit it to K through 8.
Okay, so that leaves us 5 with K through 12 and 3 with K through 8. I'm also going to go with the K through 12, mainly because what I want to see happen this year is I want to see all the extracurricular activities continue. I want to see in-person learning. And I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize that. I would hate to see our students traveling for any of their games or athletics and bringing something back. So I look at the high schoolers as most at risk for doing something like that. I'm just hopeful that we can stay in person, and if we can eliminate masks in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever happens with this variant, we will monitor it very closely, as Dr. Mann said. So that is what I just feel like we have to err on the side of keeping the kids in school, in the classroom, and participating in their activities. So that would be my vote.
So on the flip side, though, once we do that, and you just mentioned it in 3 or 4 weeks, is there a specific measuring stick that says we don't need masks?
I think Dr. Mann said not a specific one, but a combination of several things. So
Well, and what I'm leaning toward is, we looked at the incident rate and positivity rates. Is there a line there that triggers, let's relook at this?
Well, again, as I said, we will look at this constantly. We will share data. I do think, Mr. Robeson, one thing that interests me is when the vaccines, as we think when is the actual thing, when the vaccines are available to all of our students, K through 12. I think at that time, that will be a new and positive development that may be a cause for consideration with respect to removing masks. But again, that's just one of many, many different variables. Because I will tell you, if incident rates are like they were in January, on that one at the height of last year, I would, even if vaccinations come out at that time for young, I would be very reticent to say we need to change. But if we see rates are stable, going down, vaccinations are coming in for younger children, I think those would be all factors that would come into play in allowing the board to modify any action that it would take tonight with respect to masks.
I also think once the FDA approves the vaccines, we might even see a higher rate of vaccinations among
Right.
people 12 and older. I think we have a very high rate. I mean, I think the more our community gets, when we reach like 95% of our community vaccinated, I think all of those things are positive steps toward eliminating the masks.
Yeah.
We're just not there yet, but hopefully soon.
And
So
so-
then to proceed, we would be adding a motion to the agenda.
Yes, and I have a sample language that perhaps,
Okay.
if it makes sense to the board, we could add, Mrs.
Okay.
O'Day.
Yep.
And I had a number of different ones. This is the one I think applies to our discussion.
Okay.
Consider a motion to amend the Abington Heights School District Health and Safety Plan to mandate indoor masking in accord with the related provisions in the plan. And those related provisions are like lunch and, not wearing masks constantly all the time. So I'll read it one more time in case it wants to be adopted. Consider a motion to amend the Abington Heights School District Health and Safety Plan to mandate indoor masking in accord with the related provisions in the plan.
Okay. And where will that be on the,
There is on the agenda a generic line that says consideration of the health and safety plan toward the bottom.
okay?
You see that, Mrs. O'Day? Which
Yep.
one is it? L, looking at L. So that specific language will be inserted for the general language that currently exists in L.
Okay.
Okay?
I mean, the only issue there is I didn't hear K through 12. What I heard was universal masking.
Yes, universal masking. So I did in the next one say K through, by limiting it. In the next one I said K through 8 in case that was coming up. But by not having any limitation, it's all buildings, all circumstances in Abington Heights.
Okay, so it's not K through 12, it's everybody.
It's well, including the administration building, for example. So we want to be consistent. So we will have it masking in Abington Heights is where we're at with this.
All I'm pointing out is for the people that supported it, it's not K through 12, it's masking all the time, everywhere.
Correct.
Right.
Indoors, yes.
Effective immediately, so we should put our
Yes.
masks on.
Well, right, effective immediately.
Okay.
Or why don't we say effective tomorrow?
Well, that's all right.
So,
We don't debate.
okay. So that's the motion for the board to consider.
Okay.
And at this point, we're moving quickly into public comment. The public comment will have, each member of the public will have their opportunity to present. In order for us to move forward, there has to be something as a marker for public comment to occur. So I think it'd be very important, and I think wise and transparent of the board to say this is where we are, so that the public then, that is the appropriate approach the board is taking, the wise approach, the transparent and most respectful approach with respect to the community. So with that, Mr. Brzezowski, I'll conclude my report,
Okay,
and I'll shut this down and we could get back to the business.
okay. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda
So
So
moved.
second,
on the question? Roll call? Oh. Sorry.
That's all right. Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our August 4th work session and our July 21st board meeting?
So moved.
Second,
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
yes.
Mrs. Bashalski.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Do we have any board reports at this time?
Oh, you know what? Yes, the AEIO had a summer meeting with our new development committee. And we are in the process of sending letters out to all companies, individuals, anyone who's interested in supporting and giving a donation or offering some of your tax credit money to the AEIO. We are in the process of sending out letters, and they hopefully will go out by the end of August. So if you happen to receive one, please read it and help support all of our programs and help out the AEIO. Thank you.
At this time, we will have public participation. You will have 3 minutes to speak. There'll be a timer. Please try to stay within that limit. When you address the board, please state your name and where you live, because the public presentation is only available to district residents. So I'm just going to go no particular order here. Sean Kane.
All right, so my name is Sean. I have 2 girls. I'm very protective of my girls. I'm very protective of their health. And the mask thing is awful. Everybody knows here that if you are inhaling, right, you're inhaling actually the carbon dioxide that you're exhaling within a mask. I think it's something that should be optional completely. People still get the flu. Where did the flu go this year? Right? So I'm not stupid, okay? Just so you know. So I'll submit my time to the next person, whatever time is left, so.
Okay, thank you. Mark Mullen?
So I'm not.
Yep.
I'm not going to try and change anybody's mind on this subject. Sure. My name is Mark Molnar. I live in South Abington Township. I'm not going to try and change anybody's opinion on this subject because after 18 months, we all have very strong opinions about what we should or should not do. What I would like to do is to just add some perspective and hopefully change the tone of tonight's meeting. As we debate what is right and what is not right for the students moving forward, someone will say, follow the science, follow the data. We've seen Dr. Mahan put up the slides. But my question is, when did we stop saying science and we start saying the science? It's a small change in verbiage, but it's a big change in meaning. The science implies that there's only one way to look at it or one way to view it. And science is about looking at things from different perspectives and changing how we look at it. Dr. Mahan put up the slide. Some states mandate, some states outlaw the mandate. We've got to look at this over and over again from different angles. The number 2 thing that I would like to say is it has been suggested that there is a radical group of parents or that some people are concerned for safety. But when I look around this room on both sides of the debate, I see my neighbors, I see the people that coached my children in Little League, and I see the people I go to church with. The only thing radical about these people is their passion for the education and well-being of their children. It is this passion that is highly responsible for the success of the children in this district, almost as much as any policy that this board or this school district puts forward. It should be applauded. The final thing that I will say is this school board is challenged to make a decision. You ran for school board to make decisions, but most people do not like to make decisions. They would rather just be told what to do. It's easier and at least it feels safer. It may or may not be safer, but it feels safer. While we have to consider recommendations from Harrisburg or other higher entities, we should consider their guidance, but we do not have to be prisoners of their guidance. So, school board, tonight, I pray that God grants you wisdom in your decision-making process, and I pray that God softens the heart of every person in this room to openly listen to their concerns that they have for their children. Thank you.
Eric Rudy.
Everybody out there, every single person out there, if you ask them, should masks be optional? What would you say? It's a lot of people there. I would never presume to teach or tell any of you what you should do with your children's health. Never. Never would. It's not my business. Nobody here is like, everybody here wants their children to be safe. Of course they do. My idea of safety at this point is that my child doesn't rebreathe all the waste, okay? Kids are the safest. You all know that. You all know that the kids are absolutely the safest. It's not us against you. It's us and you against a decision. And I think masking should be optional. If you want to wear a mask, you're wearing one. You're not. I'm not. None of them are. Okay, that's all we're asking. We're not asking for some ridiculous thing or to overturn or overthrow anything that you all are doing, because clearly you people know what you're doing. You're in the school board. That's all we want. We want masking to be optional. Thank you.
Stephanie Luciani.
Hi, everyone. Stephanie Luciani from Clark Summit. I have a whole speech prepared tonight about my sister, who's a physician's assistant, a hospitalist with her PhD, who doesn't put masks on her kids and isn't sending them to school this fall with masks on, or my sister that's a respiratory therapist who also doesn't mask her child and isn't sending him to school this fall with a mask on. I have quotes in here from Dr. Michael Olstrom, Director of Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota, a member of President Biden's COVID advisory board, who said, cloth face coverings, and I quote, provide very little impact. You can look the interview up on PBS. I encourage you to. He said that the scientific community has been dishonest about the protection that they provide. I encourage you all to look that up. The COVID statistics in front of you are what is a threat to our children ages 5 through 14 and the deaths in that order. And I gave them all away, but it goes from the bottom. It says flu, COVID, pneumonia, drowning, cardiovascular disease, homicide, suicide, vehicle accidents, and cancer. Dr. Makari, John Hopkins, said that the public perception of COVID is an, I quote, entirely distorted. In a study of 48,000 children diagnosed with COVID, there were 0 deaths. But what I want to leave you with tonight, I invite you all to come meet my children. Each one of you on this board. I have a 10-year-old who is struggling. You can pull his grades from last year, and it's devastating to see what happened to my child. In the 4th quarter, he's not ready for 5th grade. He can't function with a mask on his face. I had a phone call from the nurse about him wearing a face shield, and it was uncalled for. My 9-year-old who cried almost every single day, he can't see his friends' faces. He can't see his teachers' faces. Or my 6-year-old who spent 18 months in speech therapy to be masked. Her face is so tiny that when she talks, it goes into her mouth. These are my kids. They're my decisions. I'm not asking you to change your mind on COVID or mitigation strategies. I'm asking you to let me be a parent. I grew these children in my body. I grew these children and I have raised them, and I am doing a damn good job of it. But I can't do it without the support of a district who allows me to parent properly, My kids, other board members' kids have played sports all summer with no mask. They've gone to friends' houses, swimming pools. They've all been together. We all have an option. They spent time with my 9-year-old nephew who had a mask on the entire time he was at my grandparents' house last week. And you know what they said? Absolutely nothing, because it was his choice and his parents' choice. It's not our business. I encourage you to allow the parents to make our decisions. This is a medical decision for our children, and it is hurting them. It is hurting my kids. Thank you.
Rachel Rudy.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Rudy. I am from Dalton. I'm a special education teacher and a mother of 3. I worked in my school building last year with students with severe cognitive needs, as well as physical and emotional needs. For those of you that are for mask mandates, which include forced masking of children in the school setting, what scientific study have you read that has brought you to this conclusion? See, during the entire pandemic, anyone that has ever tried to have a conversation with me regarding masks, particularly masking children, has never provided any actual science or data to back their view. Saying the word science does not make something science. Repeating what the CDC says does not make something science. The CDC is not the 4th branch of government. My children are not the property of the CDC, the government, this school district, this board, or any of the adults in this room who want to force children to wear a mask because you're scared of a virus with a proven 99.5% survival rate before the vaccine. Date, according to the CDC, over the last 20 months of this pandemic, there have been 361 children who have died with COVID. Out of 4.2 million pediatric cases of COVID. In 2019, there were 480 pediatric deaths from the flu. Were we masking our healthy, beautiful children then? No, we were not. According to data found on the National COVID-19 School Response Dashboard, a COVID case rate of 0.13% was found in a group of 200,000 children over the course of 6 weeks. This virus does not severely impact our children, and they rarely transmit this virus to others. We have thrown the word expert around a lot the last year and a half. As a teacher and as a mother, I am an expert in children. Forcing children to wear masks during critical years of development for several hours a day, 5 days a week, is abuse, to put it mildly. I sent the board over 30 reputable sources the other week regarding masks from places like PubMed and NIH last week. I hope you read some of them. We are restricting airflow. Masks are filthy, no matter how many times you change them. Our children are trying to learn important reading, speech, and social skills. How dare any adult lead our children to believe that they can get someone severely sick and cause them to die by being near them and by breathing freely? America is not a hospital. This state is not a hospital. This district is not a hospital. We are treating the whole world like a hospital. I'm not sick. My children are not sick. To place this burden on the majority of the population, and most importantly, our children, to provide an illusion of safety, to further uphold adult cowardice is shameful. What society intentionally negatively impacts all children in some way to protect the elderly and the sick? Even packs of animals know better. You don't sacrifice the young for the greater good of the pack. Our children are the greater good. There will come a day when all are held accountable for what occurred during this time, and that includes school boards and school districts. Thank you.
Sarah Sespico. Marry that.
Hi, I'm Sarah Sespico. I'm from Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. I'm a mom of 5. You all have heard me speak before. I have 4 boys and a little girl, ages 16 down to 5. So I'm in every school in your district, the middle school, the elementary, and in the high school. They're Italian and Irish, so we've got a lot of fire in us. If you've seen them on the football field, you know that. You know where Sespico is. We are passionate, determined, energetic. We love school and we love sports. I am a teacher. I'm a certified teacher. We've been in the Abington district for the past 4 years. We moved here for the Abington School District from Factoryville. That was our intention. And we did, we put our kids in school. We've been here until last year. Last year, we took the kids out and we had some questions with the curriculum. You all listened and heard. You all decided and you voted on a different curriculum. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that as an educator, you listening to what I had to bring to you and other people that had to talk to you about the curriculum questions. I have some children that were having some issues before COVID. They were on IP 504. Teachers were amazing. They were helping them in school, outside of school. And I appreciate that as a teacher, someone giving that time to my children. What I found when they came home from COVID and they were all home, I started teaching again, my 2 youngest ones. They're very behind. And I know the teachers expressed they were behind in math. My one child didn't know his multiplication tables. He was in 4th grade. And that to me is a sign that there's something very wrong. He's bright. He is a brilliant boy. I know that as his mom, but I hadn't been direct instructing him. I had been reviewing some things with him. I knew he's behind, but I have 5 kids and I didn't give a lot of time to it, to be honest. So as you can imagine, just meals and laundry takes up a lot of time. So when we went back to homeschooling last year, I was able to give him a different curriculum and teach him a left brain thinking, something that was never done before, and using pictures. And that triggered in him this light bulb effect, which was amazing and beautiful. And he knows his multiplication tables like this now, which is great. We want that as parents. We want that as educators for our kids to learn. Our children are not learning with masks on. He also has a speech impediment, very difficult to hear and understand through the virtual teaching and even in class. And I want you to think about that. I want you to think about a child who's frustrated, can't understand what they're supposed to be learning, can't understand what the teacher's trying to teach them. And there's a mask in between. I just want you to let that set in for a little bit as a child and remember where you were as children and remember how frustrating that is and maybe not being able to voice that because you are adapting. And let me just talk about that just for a minute, because every child will adapt, okay? Every child will adapt to the situation they're in, whether it's an abusive situation, whether it's divorced parents. We all say they've adapted to masks so well. I've even heard the word thrive. It makes my skin crawl because children will adapt. Abused children adapt. We don't want that. They're not adapting. They're not thriving. If you had the classroom and allowed them to take their masks off, said it's optional, I guarantee 95%. And I do think that some children are scared right now. I think they're scared. And I think they might want to wear a mask because they're scared because they hear us talk as adults about how scary this is. It's 99% curable. Our whole family had COVID. And I think you need to take into account too, not just those who are vaccinated, but those who have antibodies and T cells. If you do your research, your due diligence, you will find that antibodies are carried for a while, but T cells go into the bone marrow. I am not a doctor, but you are. You have the name doctor, but you're nursing, right? But you can research that yourself too. And it goes into your bone marrow. So if you look into this, I think we need to take into account kids that are vaccinated. Yeah, that's their choice. And we don't need to know that. And teachers, we also need to take into account people who carry that antibody. Why can't we allow for antibody testing? It's reasonable. I just want to speak one more thing. My other son, who has in 504 in the district, and again, his needs were met. He also has autism, high functioning, great kid. He looks like a man now. He's 13, but he's very tall. He went back to school for field day this year. So we homeschooled and all my kids did well. They came back up to grade level, which I was very excited for. I had a friend helping too. So I'm not gonna say I did all on my own, but their grandparents too, which was an amazing experience for them. My dad taught my daughter how to read. So, but my 13-year-old went back to the middle school to go back for field day. And I said, sure, that's fine. You can go back. And I was all supportive and he missed his friends and he knew that he might have to wear a mask. Now it was field day. So I thought, well, maybe outside would be fine. And he's autistic. He has a very hard time putting things on his face. If you have anybody with autism, you probably can appreciate that that's a very difficult sensory issue for them. So that is why we homeschooled. That's one of the reasons why we chose to pull out and homeschool, because they didn't know what was going to happen that year. So he went back to the middle school, went to field day, and I picked him up at the end of the day and I said, hey, how was it? You know, I'm a very positive person. Anybody who knows me, I try to live my life with positivity and choosing gratefulness and trying to be happy, right? I mean, because it's a choice sometimes. And so he got in the car and he's like, Mom, it was terrible. This is my 13-year-old who's autistic and doesn't talk about his feelings. So when he's talking about his feelings, I'm going to sit up and listen. You know him, you work directly with him. And he said, Mom, it was terrible. And I was like, well, why? I'm going to play devil's advocate because I'm always going to support the teacher in the district and the school board because I'm a teacher, right? Like that's what we do for each other as other parents even. So I was like, well, why would you say that? I'm like, it must've been so awesome to see your friends. And he's like, Mom, it was so depressing. And I, again, asked him, well, why would you say that? I'm like, it was field day. How could field day be depressing? The tables were set apart. They weren't allowed to talk in the hallways. They weren't allowed to talk to their friends. People didn't recognize them, which I said, Cade, you're now 6'1". So maybe people don't recognize you because you're 13 and huge, which, you know, it's a possibility. But no one made eye contact. And I don't know if you here in this room, if you can fully understand what children, and I say children up to age 18, they are children, considered children. I don't know if you understand what they're going through. I don't know if they're going to come and tell you. I don't know how many of you have come and talked to them. I really don't. I mean, have you gone to someone's family, like Steffi was inviting you to talk to their children, but have you gone and spoken to someone's family and asked them, how are you doing? How is this going? If you look at the rates of suicide and drug usage, I'm not talking about narcotics, I'm talking about like antidepressants, right? If you look at that, they've gone up. You're talking about numbers going up, but what about these numbers? What about these kids that we want the best for them? Is that the best for them? And I just want to remind you, you're elected officials, right? You're here on the board and you're elected, and we want to respect that, and we do want to support you. But this is something that I feel like we have to draw the line. This is history. This is history right now. And what side are you going to be on? What side of history? It's your decision. And you're going to have to live with that, whether there's litigatory process or not. That's your decision. Yeah. Okay.
So thank you.
Amy Scandell.
A kid doing their science project. But here's just some data to look at. Nice data, whether you're a number person or a flow sheet person. My name is Amy Scandell from Waverly. I've been a nurse for over 25 years. My main objective this evening is keeping masks optional. All healthcare decisions should be left up to each parent. I don't know how many times you need to hear this, but we will continue to repeat. There are various harms that masks do that we've already heard. But if you decide to change the current policy that is mask optional for everybody that you did July 21st, will this board be liable for a child's lung infection in their lungs from the dirty, filthy mask? Will this board be liable for skin abscesses or increase in cavities in my children? My children had a cavity last year and they never have, and it was after doing sports. Will this board be liable for children complaining of headaches, dizziness, drowsiness, irritability, which will impede their learning? Will this board be liable for the children that feel socially isolated? As Sarah pointed out, her son having just depressed after being around his friends, which can lead to substance abuse and suicide. Do you want that on your shoulders? A study from Germany, which I provided a hard copy on July 21st, there were 25,000 children that were asked, okay, you can debunk it. We don't know what study to trust these days, but 68% complained of one or more symptoms. And also what really caught my eye in that study was that 54% of school-aged children said they were less happy and didn't even want to go to school because of the masks. Some of the smallest children, they don't even know that they're tired, irritable, and they didn't learn math that day, and they don't know. They're not going to complain. Like Sarah said, they will adapt. Like you said 2 weeks ago, summer school's going great. They're doing great with masks. No child is going to go up to their teacher and say, can I not wear this? That's why we are here as parents. advocating for them. The data that I have here is from the Department of Health. As you see, when schools were closed, both in the state, the top is the state and the bottom is Lackawanna, they were pretty low and you were closed. They went hybrid, the numbers went up. You went back in March and April, 5 days a week, the numbers were higher than they are today. Now today, no masks all summer. I don't know about most people, but my kids have not had masks on all summer. Our numbers are low. So I just don't understand your thinking and you can't be in a panic. I decided in March of 2020, after working at a COVID clinic, testing people, I'll be done in a second, I will refuse to live in fear. I will refuse to have my children live in fear. So please, please provide the science, not the science. I haven't heard one article from any of you about what masks do. I mean, we're providing you data. And so today, again, I will leave you with this. Leave all medical decisions, including a mask as a medical decision, left up to each parent in this room and in our district.
Stephanie Tallarico.
My name is Stephanie Tallarico. I'm from Clark Summit. I'm a mom of 2 and a teacher. As an educator, I saw firsthand the abuse that our children have endured for the past 1.5 years. My students, my own children alone have gotten very angry, very negative, don't want to go to school, cry when it's time to go to school. My students in the classroom will act out more than they ever have. And these are students that I've known from 4th grade through 5th grade through, and know who they are as little adults. Their environment has changed. They changed as people, they changed as students. The health risks to our children, they're breathing in their own toxins. I know as a teacher, teaching through a mask 9 hours a day is horrific. I have headaches. I'm dehydrated. I'm everything. It encompasses toxins into your body that can go anywhere and everywhere. So if it's happening to my body as an adult, what's happening to their little bodies? The psychological effects, I've already said that their personalities are completely different. Some students have gotten so introverted from wearing that mask that they won't even take it off. To eat, they'll hide behind a book and eat like this because they're so afraid. We're also teaching them that the air around them is toxic. Right. That the people around them are sick, to always be afraid. I teach my children not to be afraid. I tell them exactly what it is. The learning environment has completely changed. Students struggle left and right. I hear it from my own students. I see my own students. I see my own children. I see it in the schools and other classrooms, and they struggle. They can't focus on what they need to learn. So therefore they're not learning. The masks don't work. I know firsthand, everybody's masked indoors all day long. A student got COVID and so did the teacher. The masks don't keep those small, tiny particles from getting through. So Dr. Mahan mentioned about the CDC not quarantining if the students wear their masks, which is completely different than last year. If they are around someone who got positive, then they need to quarantine. Now, that's not the case, that if they're wearing a mask, they don't need to quarantine. But as he also mentioned about this Delta variant, and everybody's so worried about this Delta variant, about it being so worse. If they're wearing a mask and you're so worried about the Delta variant, but they don't need a quarantine if they come in contact with someone because they're wearing their mask, don't you find that contradictory? You're talking about the CDC and all these, and everybody's following all these organizations and calling it science. I'll be done in a moment. But you got to realize the contradiction here. All of a sudden now, oh, well, let's not quarantine because we're wearing a mask, but yet be afraid of the Delta variant. The reality is your job is education, the school district. Your job is board members. Our job is our children's health, not yours.
Michelle Abda.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Abda. I'm from South Abington Township. I have 4 children in the Abington Heights School District, from high school to a 6-year-old. It was my impression that public schools, again, worried about education and should not be telling us what to do with our children and masking and their health. If I wanted that, I would go to a different school that was, that mandated things that were more of my business. But public schools, I thought, my children, my business, especially when it comes to their health. My 6-year-old has a speech impediment. And as you can see, when I walked up here, I have health problems myself. The last thing that I want to do is get COVID. It could be very detrimental to me, but I'm not going to be afraid of my children and what they're going to be bringing home. I cannot be afraid of my children. They need to be in school and learning. My 6-year-old still does not know how to read. He's struggling. He's behind. He has a speech problem because he was out of school so much last year. The masks, he needs to see his teacher. He needs to see the words being spoken. There needs to be an exchange there. With a mask on, he can't even hear the teacher speaking. My daughter is 10 years old. She has severe anxiety issues. Dr. Mahan has seen her in the past, has helped me in the past with her. When she puts a mask on her face, her anxiety goes through the roof. She can't breathe. I don't know what else to say. I'm not here with statistics or anything like that. I'm just here as a mother. And I just feel that it should be our decision, our kids, our decision. I'm not telling you guys, here tonight to put a mask on or not put a mask on. It should be our decision. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Patrick Houlihan.
Hello, my name is Patrick Houlihan. I live in North Abington Township. I'm a 1990 Abington Heights graduate and a proud parent of 2 Abington Heights graduates. And I have 2 more currently in the district. I volunteered my time over the past 20 years as a coach commissioner for Abington Community Basketball. So I mean it when I say this. Thank you for volunteering your time to service this community. I'm here today to advocate for medical freedom for families attending our school. We've learned a lot about how to handle COVID over the last 18 months. We know so much more today about how to handle this disease, who spreads it, and what's proven to work. But sadly, we've also learned some of the negative impacts of some of these COVID measures, particularly masks. We've learned how masks alter their breathing, facial expressions are muted, they are not visualizing speech, and that's just a small list to start, indicating they do impair learning. Our kids are depressed, frustrated, and disconnected from each other. Education has suffered at every grade level, and now we desperately have to catch it back up quickly before it's too late. Masking was supposed to be short term, and we're going on 2 years now, and there's no end in sight. COVID is never going away. There will never be zero cases, zero breakouts, zero spikes, particularly in the winter. Never. We've learned vaccine formulas take a long time to deliver, and they're forever behind the variants. Respiratory illnesses are not like polio or smallpox. They behave more similar to the cold or the flu. So we'll be chasing this thing forever. For these reasons, our state and federal governments struggle to mandate masks now, and they stated they want these decisions made at the local level. So this board has to make this decision based on facts, all known risks, not just COVID risks, and what we've learned and what we know about our local community. So here's what we know. We know our district and local counties work very hard and is very prepared and has one of the lowest infection rates in the country. We know there's lots of opinions on whether masks work, but no facts, no good data, and no long-term studies on how these masks will affect children. None. And there is no debate. There is no debate. Our children are having difficulty learning in masks. We know COVID mitigation strategies from the CDC are constantly changing. You know what's not changing? Our kids struggling to learn in masks, and it can get worse with more use. So that's what we know. We know this right now. We make decisions on what we know now. COVID's never going away. We mask them now. We could be masking them forever. My request to this board is to keep masks and other health decisions with parents based on their assessments of their kids' risks, just like every other known disease. Parents know better than their kids. Parents know their kids better than anyone and have been very informed, smart parents in this community. You can trust them. You all know that. Taking a health, give me 15 more seconds. Taking a health decision out of our parents' hands sends the reverse message that you don't trust them. You can even stay consistent with what you've done and continue to communicate all the CDC guidelines as they perpetually change. But you don't have to force this community to a constantly changing one-size-fits-all approach. You don't know their kids as well as they do. I want to leave this board with one question. If you require masks, based on what you know, have you considered whether doing so could expose the board or the district to liability, since it's now well accepted that mask wearing for kids accomplishes little to nothing, but is well known to have negative effects on their health, social development, education, and long-term mental well-being? Have you considered whether requiring masks is the same thing as requiring medical treatments? Because if you haven't, you shouldn't make this decision. Thank you.
Renee Chabowitz? Chabowitz?
Hello, I'm Renee Stabovitz from North Abington Township, and tonight I would just like to say, when it comes to medical decisions, such as masking, parents make these decisions. It's not one size fits all when it comes to these decisions. If you feel your child needs a mask to be safe at school, then send them with the mask. You can send them with 2 masks. You could send them with an N95 mask, mask and goggles, mask and a face shield. It is your personal choice. Parents choose what's best for their children when it comes to medical decisions. If you feel that your child is safe in school without a mask, then you send them without one. Once again, it's the parent's choice. And when it comes to masking, did masks really reduce what was happening with transmission? Did anyone look at, now our kids have transmission awareness? Before, when we had cold and flu season, were kids really aware how that was transmitted? And did we do anything to really reduce those numbers? Now students know, if you're sick, you stay home. Parents know now, if their kids are sick, we keep them home. I was a teacher. There would be kids sick in my classroom all the time. Now we finally got to the point where that doesn't happen and people keep sick kids home. So has that helped lower the transmission rate? Hand washing. Now people are into hand washing. So maybe this has had an effect on lessening COVID? Or is it just the mask? Social distancing. The kids aren't on top of each other anymore like they were. Did this help bring COVID down? Or once again, was it just wearing a mask? Out of all these, I think probably staying home when you're sick is the biggest, and washing your hands. And another point that people really aren't looking at, how many of our students had COVID and have natural antibodies? Everybody points to the vaccine, but even though you are vaccinated, you can still transmit COVID. You can still get COVID. Your symptoms may be lessened. And now we're on a third booster shot. So do the vaccines really work when it comes to transmission and spreading and people getting COVID? Or is the science settled on that one? When the prevention causes more harm with masking, it's time to reevaluate it. Thank you.
Sarah Houlihan.
Good evening. My name is Tara Houlihan, and I live in North Abington Township. I'm a 1991 Abington Heights graduate and a mom of 4, 2 Abington graduates and 2 in the district. Growing up, I was always taught by my parents, my grandparents, to respect other people's views, be it political, religious, etc. This would also include intimate health decisions. The parents that are speaking for masks to remain optional, I don't think any of them would ever tell another parent if they felt it was the right decision for their child to wear a mask, not to. We respect them. Unfortunately, I cannot say anymore the same for everyone else. Some people are demanding that all teachers, administration, and students wear a mask with no exceptions. They want to make medical decisions for other people's children. Why do you think they have that right? I'm not sure. Our children are taught about consent in regards to hugging, kissing, and touching, but not in regards to other things forced upon their bodies, such as masks, breathing fresh air, a most human basic right, or the option to accept or refuse a non-FDA approved medical device, such as a mask, are being discarded. Did you know that masks like the PCR test and COVID vaccines are all only EUA FDA approved? Under US Code 360 BBB-3, it states that any emergency use authorized product cannot be mandated. I sent you an email with all this information, so you'll have it. The person must be given the option to accept or refuse the product. Also, Purdon's Pennsylvania statutes and consolidated statutes, Title 24 PS Education, allows for objections to examination or treatment on religious grounds. I believe a mask may be considered a medical treatment since it is being used under the assumption that it will help stop the transmission of a virus. Another question, what state or federal law gives a school board authority to make medical decisions for other people's children, such as mandating universal masking? Is there one? Like, all seriousness, what is it? We deserve to know as parents. These are our kids. So I would really like someone to follow up with me on that one. If a school board does possess this authority, what statistics, including for our local county, will you use to determine when you feel all the physical, emotional, and educational risks for children of mandated masks are worth it? Do you know there are no peer-reviewed studies that show masks do anything to stop the virus? Even the mask manufacturers put disclaimers that they don't work, that they're adult use only. even, so these companies, they have disclaimers to protect their product from liability, from themselves from liability. And my question is, are you opening up the school board district to liability? Speaking with parents of children that were mandated to wear the mask, they had headaches, they had dizziness. And what are we supposed to do as parents? Because please tell me, you're making medical decisions. So I guess I need to look at you as my children's doctors and nurses. When my child has a headache, am I every day and dizzy from these masks, am I supposed to give them Tylenol, Advil? What about their kidneys? What about their liver? Like, seriously, these are serious questions. When our kids are dizzy during class, are we supposed to tell them, ignore the signs that your body is telling you, that you may faint, that something worse may happen? Are we supposed to say, no, you must obey and keep that mask on if you want an in-person education at the tax-funded public school? We are not comfortable with this. Please help me, because if you decide to make masks mandatory for all children, other people's children, I don't know what we are going to do. So finally, do you know there are 2 neighboring school districts, Lackawanna Trail and Lakeland? They are still mask optional. So what is the magical thing between Lakeland and Trail about Abington that makes it need masks? So I am going to send an exemption letter for my kids because I believe from the research I did that I as a parent have the right. And I suggest anyone else that does not want their child to wear a mask, send an exception letter. Thank you.
Erica Joyce.
Hi, my name is Erica Joyce. I live in South Abington Township. I have 2 kids, one in the district, one who's a little bit young yet. And I am a doctor in the area. I agree with 100% with what these parents have already said. I totally disagree with mask mandatory from K through 12. It's unhealthy for our children, like they've said. So I'm not going to reiterate everything that they have said. But I do want you to know that if your vaccine that you all this or not decided to take, that you want to make mandatory too, until we all can get the vaccine, which I'm thankful that K through 8 can't get it yet because my children are in that area. But if you truly believe in the vaccines, then you should know that the people who are vaccinated should be covered. You should, just like the flu and all the other vaccinations, you should be covered under that vaccine umbrella. Okay, when you get vaccines when you're a child, they're supposed to take care of you. It's supposed to have a herd immunity, which you all have heard of, I'm sure. And they cover the ones that didn't get vaccinated. But if you're fearful of that, then what is the point of that? What is the point of doing that? Because like they said before, COVID is never going to go away. It will be here to stay. It's not like smallpox. That was an only human vaccine. That's why they could get rid of it, because it was only in human beings. It wasn't in any animal, which COVID has been found to be transmitted. So now it can be transmitted throughout it. We cannot stop it. It is not going to happen. Our bodies are designed to fight viral, bacterial, and fungal attacks. That's how we're built. We have 380 trillion viruses on us right now. All of us do. And that includes COVID. You have to realize that there's a lot of people out here who have been around people with COVID, who have had COVID, and we do, like they said, have the antibodies. So I am for the antibody testing. I think that's a much better test than mask wearing. And I know some of you don't even have students in this district. And we are the parents. We should make these decisions for our children's health. And my daughter is so upset because I'm not going to send her here if she has to wear a mask. And she is so upset about that. I moved to this district because it's a great district.
I moved here and pay the high taxes to be here. But you guys are supposed to be listening to us. You know, that higher level of people you were talking about, we have to listen to this, all of those government agencies. We're yours. We're your voice that you guys are supposed to listen to. Thank you.
Tiffany Perfilio? I said that right?
Yes, thank you. Hello, I'm Tiffany Perfilio. I live in Clark Summit. My husband and I are new to the school district. We moved here about 3.5 years ago, so our children could thrive in an incredible school district. I'm going to start to tell you a little bit about my oldest son, though. His name is Pierce. He will be starting kindergarten in the fall this year at Abington Heights. Pierce is diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic and ASD. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means he's on the autism spectrum. He is a bright and happy child, but with his diagnosis comes some struggles. Pierce has sensory issues and is completely nonverbal. That doesn't mean he is incapable of speaking, he just chooses not to. Now I ask you to think for a moment about your children. Think back to when they were young, learning to walk, learning to talk. How are they taught? By your example, by watching what you do. And that goes through all stages of life. You learn how to walk, you learn how to crawl, you learn how to eat. It's by watching your parents or whomever might be raising you. For Pierce, with his sensory issues, wearing a mask will stress him out and hinder his learning. It will cause him, just like other children, to be distracted, frustrated, uncomfortable, hot, as well as that of him learning to speak. That is completely hindered. He is physically unable to watch his teacher speak, to watch his peers speak. To learn social, wearing a mask is hurting the ability of all children to learn social cues, which is already a huge struggle for children with autism. If you've all seen Big Bang Theory, I'm basically raising Sheldon. It hinders him from seeing his peers speak to him and learn to speak on his own without a device. His ability to move forward educationally is hindered by these masks. You said earlier that you want a safe and nurturing environment for our children, but forcing our children to wear masks isn't nurturing. It is scary to small children. It's hard to breathe, it's uncomfortable, it's distracting. And I personally am miserable as a grown adult. My son was at the NEIU in person 4 days a week for the past year with no mask, along with several of other children in his class. No cases. School never closed. Everyone was fine, teachers and students. And these children are people who are at the highest risk. They have all different ailments. It's not just children with autism or a speech delay. It's children with breathing tubes and different apparatuses to help them get through the day. Lost my place, I'm sorry. I want to stress to you today that at the end of the day, these are our children, and we are always going to make choices that we feel are the best choice for them. Please allow us as parents to make what we think is the best choice for them, to care for our children and make medical decisions for them. It is our right and duty to do what's best for them, not you guys.
Kristen Stanton? Did I say that wrong? I think Kristen, S-T. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry about that.
I'm Kristen Stanton from Newton Township. I've been a nurse for 11 years. A mom of four, one graduated already, and I currently have one child in each building in the district. Before I start, I would like to know how many of you making this decision for my children and all of our children have children in this district besides Red or whoever he is. I don't know which one is Red. You have just, okay. So What will the repercussions be for the children who flat out refuse to wear one once they're in the building? So what you are essentially saying, the school environment is unsafe if you'll be requiring masks for all. If that's the case, there has to be a virtual option for those afraid to be exposed and for those who don't want the children to be masked all day. Masks in school should be optional. Plain and simple. You want your kids in a mask? So be it. I don't want mine in a mask all day, and that should be my choice without having to enroll them in a charter school or do virtual where my children have learned absolutely nothing. Everyone has their own beliefs about what's best for their child, and we should be left that decision come September. You have no idea if masks are stopping the spread in schools because we have yet to attempt school without masks. We need to stop acting as if this virus is going anywhere. It's not. We were never concerned with masks during the flu, which actually does kill far more children. It says right on the packaging of these masks that you want to put on our children's faces all day, that it does not stop or slow the spread of this virus. It's time to move on.
Kevin White.
My name is Kevin White. I'm from Glenburn Township, and I'm standing here to voice my opposition to the mask mandate. You know, as parents, sometimes we impose our fears and our anxiety on our children unintentionally, no matter how irrational those fears may be. And this is one of those cases where I think that many parents do just that. And worse is when others impose their fears and their anxiety on my children. I have 3 children that are still in the school district, 2 in high school, 1 in middle school. And all of my children have had COVID. And I'll tell you right now, it wasn't bad. It was not bad. I hear the statistics over here. And it was no more than a common cold. One had a sore throat. He was stuffy. He was congested. The other just was congested. My youngest, who is 12, didn't have any symptoms. They all tested positive for COVID. There is an irrational fear of the health effect of COVID in children. And as a parent, I am much more concerned with the health risk, the social risk, the emotional risk that comes with putting a mask on my children than I am of the health risks associated with COVID for my children. And my children complain of the mask. My youngest 12-year-old suffers from headaches when he wears a mask. And it's unnecessary. I want to raise children that are healthy, that have natural immunity, which my kids do now, without social issues, emotionally sound. And I strongly feel that masks are a hindrance to that. This should not be the norm. I hear the word new norm. This should not now nor ever be the new norm. It is time to get back to normal and let our kids be kids. Thank you.
Sespico.
Hello, my name is Reed Sespico, and I went to CSE Elementary School, and I do not like wearing a mask in school. It's definitely not normal wearing a mask there.
He's my introvert, and I didn't even you'll be 16. So that's just, yeah, just see all of that.
Nick Miller.
I didn't know where I was on the list, but my battery's about to die, so that would have been a problem.
Uh-oh.
My name is Nick Miller. I live on Greenwood Ave in Clark Summit. Don't egg my house if you don't like what I say. It's okay. Uh, My wife and I have 4 children. Besides the supreme blessing of being loved by our Creator God, and obviously being married to each other, we have an older son who's now 23, chef in Seattle, who graduated from Abington Heights. I have another son who's 20, graduated from Abington Heights. And our third greatest blessing in our family was adopting twins at birth who were severely premature, drug addicted, and who are walking miracles in your school district as juniors. And personally, I'm not a physician, but my everyday professional life deals with this directly. Almost every week since the start of this COVID, what's being labeled as a pandemic, I travel on an airplane all over the country and I deal directly with this issue. I deal with indoor air quality and I hear it from all sides of all states and all this in this entire country. Some people hear me say that I travel on an airplane every week and then they treat me like a leper. So I get it. I'm fine. I came in here tonight making the assumption that everybody that sits at this table said yes to doing what you do with good motives, with the motives for our children, with the motives to make our school district one of the best in the area. My wife and I moved here from New Jersey in 2012 and chose this district over others because of that. We've had our own challenges with the special ed department, but ultimately I believe you guys, I came in here with the assumption you do what's best for our kids. I don't know how many of you came onto this table, onto this responsibility since the start of COVID. I'm going to assume most of you are here before COVID even started, so I can't imagine. Well, I somewhat can imagine that you deal with very, very difficult decisions you've never had to deal with before. I personally sat on a leadership team that affected thousands of people and had to have this exact same conversation for hours and had to make very difficult decisions. So I don't speak blindly from that standpoint either. I do know that this COVID thing has caused serious harm. I know people who have died of COVID. I know people who have gotten sick from COVID. Most of my family has gotten sick from COVID. I have a pregnant niece who got COVID and is about to deliver a baby like 3 days ago. She hasn't gone yet. We haven't gotten a call. But I also know since the start of 2020, I know people have died of cancer. People have died in respiratory issues. People have died of heart disease. I even had a friend, dear friend of mine recently die of suicide. So people have died and gotten sick from many other things besides COVID since the start of 2020. At the start of this meeting, Dr. McMahon mentioned and pointed out, I think correctly, that there's a lot of opinions related to this. And sadly, this has gotten politicized. There's certain leaders in our country who prior to the election in 2020 wanted to label this experimental vaccine, which is all it is, as something they would never take because they hated the current president. Now those same people are championing it. And before all the Republicans in this room clap, the same thing has happened with the Democrats. There's Republicans prior to the election of 2020 who said this is the best thing ever and now refuse to take it. So there's no question this has been politicized. And that makes it even more confusing. The struggle I have is things that are thrown out like authoritative sources and things like that, that are not reliable, that are unsubstantiated and keep changing. And I do believe that deep down, there are certain people in the leadership that make these decisions in the health department that have good intentions. And I believe there's scientists in the back rooms trying to make a vaccine that actually really work. I do believe that. But we also know this whole thing has been politicized and there's also people trying to get rich on it. So it's a shame when we throw these statements out like it's just a matter of fact. And the reality is that they've been guessing since the beginning of 2020. And we've all been in those situations where we have to figure it out and the information comes in and you make a decision now based on the information you have, but later you get more information, you have to make a different decision. And as a leader, you end up looking like you're contradicting yourself. So I understand that. You got to make decisions based on the information you have, but they're still guessing. I've even heard it said that kids who go to school with a mask will be committing murder. Now, I understand that there's extreme statements and extreme positions on both sides that are absolutely unrealistic, and we should never have that as even part of the conversation. But the reality is that we're guessing, and extremism cannot control or influence our decisions. And it has been stated, and obviously there's a pretty loud majority here in this room. I don't know where the other side is and the other opinions that might have other insights, but I haven't heard any yet tonight. But there's inconsistency. And it was even acknowledged in some of what was said even by this board, that whether masks work or not. For every study you give me that a mask works, I can show you 3 that show they don't. For every one you show me that this experimental vaccine that you want to force into an arm of somebody works, I can show you 3 studies peer-reviewed from doctors, medical people, even in people in my world that will show you that it doesn't. So it's just foolish to say that we can study, rely on these things and not have any balance. It is also proven, as I'm not going to go into it too much, but it's proven that kids are at the lowest minuscule risk of this issue. And that's just been documented. That one board member here said it's a fact that the vaccine works. I don't think you can make that statement. I think that's an extreme statement. It used to be the vaccine is going to keep you from getting it. Now it's going to keep you from sick and dying. And now we hit off the mask. If we're vaccinating, this is still an experimental thing. They're figuring it out. It's completely delusional and unsubstantiated to make these claims. Has been asked, what data are you looking at? Here's the other thing I see, and I just had it come my way today, and I have to deal with it in my business world. This statement, abundance of caution. That used to mean we make a wise decision based on information we receive from both sides of the conversation and all throughout it to find a good, balanced, wise decision. Now, the abundance of caution seems to be, well, I'm going to go further than the last person so I can look like a greater hero than the other board. And that's just not. That's not, and then we disguise that, well, what's best and safe for our kids? I think that's a delusional way to do it. I'll get to that in a second. At the core of it is really what is best for our kids. What's most discouraging to me is not a single one at this table, when you announced your decision, which seems to have been predetermined before you walked in here, not a single one of you referenced anything from the other side of the other harm these conversations are having to our kids. When I was in college, I learned this. I only remember one thing from speech class in college, and it was that 70 to 80% of our communication is nonverbal. And I would imagine that's slightly exaggerated for adults, though I teach my 17-year-old how he walks and how he presents himself as he's looking for employment. He actually works for me now. But I gotta believe that's even stronger in kids. No one here mentioned what damage is being caused to our kids, not just with the mask and the destruction of their immune system, which is just completely a reality, and nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about the other rise in RSV and flu and all these other respiratory issues now in the summer, when we don't usually have this in the summer. And maybe it's the fruit. Some scientists would say it's the fruit of masking these kids for too long and what happened in the winter. So I'm not saying that's the fact. I'm just saying you can't ignore that possibility. Nobody here talks about the other things that you want to bring for our kids. We put our kids in the school district, and other parents put their kids in the school district because we trust that you're going to make decisions that are best for our kids, not just their health, which is our decision, not yours. But what about their emotional health? What about their spiritual health? What about their relational health? What about all the other parts of who they are as a person and the health that we want to bring to them besides their educational health? We can have kids that can come out of these high schools and know all the math and all the physics and all the science and all that other stuff. But if they don't know how to be better people and think for themselves and all the other things that come into developing the person to prepare them for life, then we've completely failed. So no one here has talked about the other things that go into safety for the kids, the best well-being for our children. And this whole thing about science, science, it's just hypocritical. I personally met with the principal of your high school the year that President Obama, that morning, she got a fax as a surprise when she got a fax on her machine about now having to have kids share the bathrooms because they feel like a boy or girl. Don't tell me about science if we can't acknowledge the science of our biology. Don't talk about science. Don't talk about science if we can't talk about the reality of life at conception. And I'm talking as a parent. I'm talking as a parent whose children were $40 away from an abortion. And those children were life at conception. So I don't speak ignorantly of this situation. I just want you to realize that your responsibility with all the differing opinions. I don't understand, and quite honestly, in my mind, I don't understand any of you can contemplate not making mass optional. That's the only thing that you can do for these kids, for family, and for any level of integrity for our school district. That's my opinion.
Chairman Spear, Clark Summit. First, I'd just like to thank Dr. Mahan for your service here and your exceptional leadership. Wish you nothing but the best in the future. Next, I'd like to just say the idea that Johnny going home and killing grandma from COVID is ridiculous. And a bunch of you said it's not an easy decision. And there's, I think, two main reasons for that. Our public health institutions have lost all credibility, so people don't believe them. And two, it's outside of your purview. It's not your responsibility to make. It's the parent's choice. So in the last year and a half, out of the 75 million 18 and under population in the United States, about 400 have died from COVID, nearly all of them having some major pre-existing condition. Conversely, about 12,000 die each year from accidents, burns, this and that at home. So just like that isn't your responsibility to try and manage. You're not health managers, you're school board members. So just like that's not your responsibility, neither is COVID. I'd like to thank you for your time. We'll be opting out of the mask requirement. Thank you.
Mike Mahalik.
Hey, after several years, I'm back. My name is Mike Nahalnik, resident of Newton Township. I live there with my wife, Maria, my two sons, Jacob, who's a recent graduate, as well as Colton, who is going to be in 7th grade. I'm going to make this short and sweet because obviously I picked the wrong meeting to come to discuss what I want to talk about. I've also served as the assistant coach for the boys varsity lacrosse team here for the past 5 years. Prior to that, I spent many evenings several years ago in here discussing, pushing for a program. And I see one of our other core members here this evening, Bonnie Janis, and we left here many times dejected and on the brink of quitting. But we persevered and we were determined because we knew what we wanted was going to be a benefit to our students, our student athletes in this community. I wanted to address a couple things. First, I want to thank you guys again for your vote several years ago to approve boys and girls lacrosse as a pay-to-play program. I also want to thank you for your recent decision to approve it for a fully funded school sport. That was our goal all along, and I couldn't be more proud of that decision and the effort for what you guys voted for here and the hard work that we put in to get to where we are today. He's not here tonight, but I'd also like to thank the athletic director, Randy Hanyon. It's been an honor working hand in hand with him over these past 5 years to get lacrosse up and running at our school. He definitely has the students' interests at heart, a great person to work with. That's all stuff that we all know here. Some of the new things I want to update you guys on of what we've been at over the last 5 years that you guys might not be aware of. We just finished our second season with our own, let me put it this way, 3 years ago, we were on a bus trip away, going to an away game. And the coaches were talking, we're like, what do we need to do to take our program to the next level? The obvious answer was get our youth feeder program. So we became involved with another core group that was already starting that. And we just finished up our second season with our AH Attack program. That mainly was created by a blend of Scranton Youth and Tribe, which is Lakeland's feeder program. And now we have all of our Abington kids pretty much under our feeder program to feed the high school team, which is going to be a tremendous progress for us in the future. We do play in the Wyoming Valley Conference. There's 13 teams in addition to us. We travel to places like Crestwood, Dallas, Delaware Valley, to name a few. Over the years, we've played non-conference games against teams like Danville and Binghamton. Being fully, now we've played 13 league games over the first 5 years. Being fully funded is going to allow us to max out at 18 games, and which is going to extend our season by a full month. That's additional practices, 5 extra games. That's give the kids more opportunity to play the sport that they love. We just finished, like I said, we just finished our second season at Age Attack, and some of the highlights, our 5th and 6th grade team went undefeated in league play. We won the Back Mountain Brawl down in Dallas. We won the first annual Summit Slam hosted by Age Attack here. We finished in 2nd place in the championship game in NXT Spring League down in Philly, playing against teams that feed teams like Penn State lacrosse, Johns Hopkins, Syracuse. So we've got the pipeline ready to get to the high school level. We just had a write-up on the PLL's website, Premier Lacrosse League, by Alan Rabel. He is the co-founder of Premier Lacrosse. His son is Paul Rabel. For those of you who may not know, Paul Rabel is the Michael Jordan of lacrosse. So if you have the opportunity, look that up on the newsletter. It's a great article about our high school program and our youth program in general. I would like to end by thanking you guys for the difficult decision that you guys have here to make. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, but I would like to thank Dr. Mann too for your service to this school district over these years. Southern Lehigh is lucky to have you, and you will be greatly missed. Yeah. Greatly missed. I would also like to finish. I had no intention about talking about what everybody else is talking about, but I would like to give you a perspective from a coach's point of view. Last year, the 13 teams in our league, 12 of our teams at our districts required the kids to wear masks. So we masked them when we were stuck inside for practice, when we were out on the field, during games, on bus rides, everywhere. There was one school district that did not require their teams to mask up. They had major outbreaks and had to quarantine their entire team multiple times, lost several games, either to postponement or complete cancellations because they had to quarantine their whole team. We were actually on our way to their game, and we got a call from the athletic director, and he said, "Don't get off the bus." So he said they're having a problem with contact tracing. We had to turn our bus around, and I had to look at 30 kids dejected because they couldn't play a game of lacrosse. Now, this is just a sport here, and we have other issues we're dealing with this situation. But the last thing I want to see is the dejected look on those kids' faces again. I also don't want to see an entire grade of kids lose their senior year like happened before. So anything we can do to make sure that our kids aren't sitting at our kitchen table getting schooled or missing their senior or any year of athletics, we should take any precaution necessary to make that an opportunity. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ava Tedderborn. I'm sorry if I didn't say that right.
Hi, my name is Dr. Eva Tettenborn, Associate Professor of English at Penn State Scranton, where we just switched to universal masking for everybody, even though we're all adults and had a chance to vaccinate. I'm the mother of a rising 3rd grader at CSE who has never complained about her mask. And I want to commend you on the choice you've made tonight to protect those of us. Would you please wait for your turn? I haven't interrupted any of you either. So at Penn State, my job is to instruct students in research, logic, and the evaluation of arguments and information literacy. So I'm asking all of us today to cut through the noise, and let's recognize that not all sources are equal or authoritative. And I want to make a note on someone's point made last week, claiming that no peer-reviewed studies of masks and their efficacy exists. That is patently false. You can find them in the Journal of School Health, in the Journal Risk Analysis, in the Journal Ciencia et Saúde Colectiva. Apologies for my Portuguese, this is Brazilian. IOP Conference Series, Material Science and Engineering has an article, Scientific Reports, that's a UK study, Journal of Travel Medicine. So this has been studied thoroughly and with a conclusive and resounding yes, they do work. And there's a mythology of the CO2 buildup and whatnot. That's not a thing. So what can we do here today? We can follow the science and common sense, and we can follow the actual experts. Everybody thinks they're an expert, but not everybody is an expert. So let's be proactive, not reactive. Let's look at what the CDC is saying and what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying. Those are the folks to whom my pediatrician looks when I ask her about what to do for my daughter. She refers to American Academy of Pediatrics, and they all support universal masking in schools, regardless of location. You might also consider the state's offer that came out tonight, published today in the Scranton Times Tribune, about possibly conducting weekly pooled testing of classes. My preference would be in addition, not instead of masking. So thank you so much for your hard work and for taking this very difficult step in protecting those who need it most, because they have no vaccine. My kid is eager to get the vaccine. I have to tell her we have to wait. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Jake Walter.
My name is Jake Walter. I have two kids. We're in Clark Summit. One is going to be entering kindergarten. My wife basically covered him earlier. He's autistic and he's nonverbal. He has to be able to see people speak. He has to be able to watch the words being formed in their mouths. And if he's wearing a mask and the teachers are wearing a mask, how is the teacher going to see what he is doing with his mouth when he is speaking to correct him and to help him and guide him and to learn how to speak? They're not going to be able to. If they're wearing those clear masks, they're going to fog up immediately. If they don't, they'll work for as far as the mask will work, but they will
Ignore
not
that.
work.
I'm sorry, this timer's going up. Just ignore that. You're well within your time frame. And I apologize for the interruption.
It's fine. But he needs that guidance. He needs that extra push, and he's going to be denied it if he's wearing a mask. And people I'm not going to debate efficacies of masks. I'm not going to debate whether the virus is scary or not. I'm not going to debate whether we should do any of the other things we're doing, but the masks need to be our decisions and not your decision. They can't be left. We can't, if you're saying it's universal and you're saying it's everybody, from the very beginning of COVID, my son was not wearing masks in stores. He was not required to. He has a sensory disorder. Is he going to be required to with a universal masking policy in the school? If you're going to do that, you're directly going against how we've been working this the entire time. And if you're telling me that you're taking the advice of higher organizations, you're completely denying them when you're using this in ASD classrooms. And that was all I had.
Ray Petrin.
Boy, I'm glad you all are here because I might be I might be pretty unpopular, but I appreciate your willingness to work through this decision. I can only imagine how tough it is given the split in public opinion and the care for our children that clearly everybody here has, including you. So I applaud your work in this matter. I've been on committees too regarding COVID and masking, and those decisions aren't easy. I want to say too that I appreciate the decision that you made tonight. I'm a researcher. I don't do microbiology or COVID research, but I'm a researcher, so I understand science.
I understand how to review science. I understand the process of science. And from that standpoint, I know the science is clear that masks work. So I'm not going to change anybody's mind, obviously. But thank you for sticking with real rigorous science on this. Regarding anecdotes, my son's 11. Oh, by the way, I'm from Waverly, Ray Petron. My son's 11. He goes to the middle school. He's doing great. He wears a mask all the time. He wears a mask in public all the time. I wore this thing all day for 6 hours leading a training. It's a nuisance, but no headaches, none of those concerns. And the science is clear. So thank you for that. I want to add too, many folks have said this is a medical issue. It's not a medical issue when you move into a public space. When you move into a public space, it's a safety issue and it's a public health issue. And so I appreciate your willingness to uphold your obligation to keep our children safe, to keep my 11-year-old safe, to keep his grandma who lives with us safe too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, was that it? Is there someone?
Yes. Mrs. Brashowski, we do have some people who would like to participate on the virtual. And so it looks like our first person will be Mr. Philip Hourahane. So we're going to, Mr. Hourahane, we're going to allow you to talk now, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me, despite the fact I couldn't be there in person. And thank you for sitting through a list of near 20 or so people expressing one side of an argument and the only individual there expressing the others, which I'm not at all sure represents the balance in the community as witnessed by previous meetings. This appears to be, and I don't criticize people for doing this, organized voices coming together in concert. The current CDC guidance is that every person, vaccinated or otherwise, wear masks in public indoor settings in areas with substantial transmission. Lackawanna County, where we are now, unfortunately has met that criteria for every day since a few days after the last meeting. So it's not good and it's getting worse. But if you look around the room, anyone who's not wearing a mask is evidence that a mask optional policy will mean that some people will choose, because it's an option, to not do that. So it's a fantasy to think that if masks are optional, everyone will send their kids to school wearing a mask. The people who don't are those who don't follow the guidelines to limit the spread, and therefore arguably precisely the people who are most likely to pick up the virus, pass it on to school-going children. In our last meeting, Lisa Evans, who spoke in opposition to mask mandates, talked about choices. She values the freedom to choose. She cited, for example, the choice to choose where she shops. Quoting now, of course, I believe that not everything can be optional. I don't believe in running a red light. And the very relevant question here, for everyone in this room who's been taking either side of the argument, is what's the difference between those two choices? We had lots of people talking across each other in the last few sessions, each side not really seeming to hear the other because we've not grappled with that question. Why do we, as a society, feel that we should have some choices but that we should limit others? And the answer, in the case of running a red light, is that it puts others in harm's way. I'm not free to do it because I could harm people who have not made the choice to take that risk. The consensus medical opinion from the CDC, the PA Department of Health, the AAP, lots of them, lots of other health institutions across the country, is that someone with COVID, unmasked, indoors, puts people near them at risk. The behavior of that person puts those around them at risk. Now, I doubt that many people are callous enough to say, well, I just don't care if I'm putting your child and your family at risk. Some will, because there are all kinds of people in the world, but not many. Some may say, I believe that risks are overstated and they don't warrant wearing a mask. Now, that's a more defensible position. That's a better position to be in, obviously, but it's an opinion. And it is not the opinion of the public health institutions in this state or across most of the country. So a mask optional stance would be guaranteeing unmasked, unvaccinated children will be in prolonged close contact indoors with other unvaccinated children, letting them put the people around them at risk. That position can only be justified by the I don't care stance, which I don't believe the board takes, or the I think it's not that bad stance, which is not supported by the relevant public health institutions. There's been a couple of people saying there's been no evidence about mask efficiency or effectiveness. There is an article on the AHSD website which does talk about mask efficiency and says that in a room, the safe time for an infected individual, in a classroom, safe time for an infected individual is 1.2 hours for natural ventilation, 7.2 hours with mechanical ventilation, because the study was about mechanical ventilation. So 7.2 hours with mechanical ventilation without a mask. 80 hours with a mask. The graph has to have a different scale, hours versus days, for masked versus non-masked. The information put forward to us by the school board is that masks are effective. So that's the uncomfortable position we're in. I do sympathize with people who have the other side of the opinion, but the idea that it is an individual choice for the parent, for some other parent, to make a choice about the safety of my child seems wrong. It is the responsibility of the school board to provide a duty of care to the children. And it sounds like we're lining up to do that, and I applaud you for taking that stance. Thank you for listening to me.
Now we have Karen Scott. Karen, can you hear us?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
All right, very good. Yes, I'm Dr. Karen Arscott. I'm a physician in the Abington School District. I'm in Waverly in particular. I've been here for many, many years. I just wanted to comment on the fact that and I will not say science literature, but in the medical literature. So talking about the Journal of American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, Annals of the Medical Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, there is countless articles about the fact that masks work. Not only do they work, but if you look into it, masks are not physically harmful to anyone that wears a mask. So with that being said, and with the concern that we have right now, the CDC recommendation is that anyone within indoor space should be masked at all times, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. We're talking about children who are unvaccinated through grades 6. You cannot get the vaccine at this point. We need to protect our children. Somebody said that children are at low risk for this disease. That's true. However, we need to think about what level of child illness or death are we willing to accept? Is one child death acceptable? 10, 100, 200, 400? I don't think one avoidable child death is acceptable. That's my opinion. Other people may say, well, somebody else's child, if they die, that's okay. I don't agree with that. One child death, in my opinion, is unacceptable. And so with that said, I thank you so much for your service tonight and for listening to so many people and for listening to opinions. I hope that this board will act in such a way as to protect our children, protect our families of Abington, and avoid the politicization of this disease. Whenever a public health matter becomes politicized, we have harmful things happen. We need to stay safe. We need to listen to the medical people, not people spouting ideas and thoughts and feelings that have no basis. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And then it looks like we have Joe Healy. Joe Healy, you hear us?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me okay?
you're coming in clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I just wanted to, actually, it was my wife that was supposed to be on the call tonight, but unfortunately, well, first, we have 3 children in the district, 4th and 2nd and kindergarten will be starting. But my wife was supposed to be here tonight, but unfortunately, she's not able to be here because she's busy treating a hospital full of COVID patients, 100% of which are unvaccinated. So I can't believe we're this far along into the pandemic and people seem to still not be clear that the spread of COVID occurs asymptomatically in many, many cases, meaning it's futile to rely on your child, quote, feeling sick to assess any potential contagion. I mean, that's one of the main crazy things about this disease is how rapidly it spreads completely asymptomatically. And I mean, I know that the pandemic is inconvenient, but if we just stick our fingers in our ears and ignore the facts, it's not going to make it go away. I mean, and yes, of course, things are changing as we go along in this pandemic as the situation changes. Like, believe it or not, like earlier today, I didn't need an umbrella, and yet, lo and behold, now I do. Things change, and that's going to continue with the pandemic as new information comes in. We're always running about whatever information is out today is usually on a 2-week lag as to what we're actually facing in terms of numbers and in terms of cases at present. I mean, just the amount of complete speculation and political propaganda, it seems, in lieu of any sort of evidence we've heard tonight is a little mind-blowing. So I think we need to completely disabuse ourselves that this is a choice that we're talking about, because children 12 and under have no choice in this, and it is up to us to keep them safe. And this is no different than when we were in school 30, 40, 50 years ago, and even now, before the pandemic, that none of us could have attended a public school without our vaccinations. The only thing that has changed is that these children are not yet able to receive protection from the vaccine. So the next best thing that we can do is continue to wear masks. It certainly is everybody's right to choose for your child to have, let's say, like if you want a pet cobra, okay, that's your choice. It is not your choice to let your child take that pet cobra into the school, keep it in the desk, and then endanger the welfare of other classmates. This is no different. So bringing the term choice into a conversation, it really doesn't have any place in terms of speaking about how public health works. And the Delta variant is it's a completely new ballgame. It's more transmissible. The only thing, matter of fact, the only thing that's changed from last year when masks were completely mandatory for everyone in school is that the Delta variant is more virulent and more contagious, more virulent in children. That literally is the only thing that changed. And some people feel that we should make the change to not have masks. So, I mean, we just, I would really encourage the board, and I'm really pleased to see that we're not basing policy off of any kind of hysteria, pseudoscience, or feelings. And if anybody does choose, again, if they want to use that word choice, to believe in pseudoscience and feels that it's their right to putting their fear of putting a piece of cloth over their child's face above the safety of their children and our children, then that's fine. But the district should make every effort to provide them with the very best virtual options so that they can remain maskless in the safety and comfort of their own homes. But the rest of the taxpaying parents, I know, will continue to demand the science-based safety measures that I'm sure that we will be taking. So it's just there's simply not two sides to every single argument, and this is one of them. So I want to just thank the board for your time and your service, and congratulations, Dr. Mahan. If I didn't know any better, I'm sure you're probably about ready to just join witness protection and maybe spend out the rest of your days down in the Bahamas somewhere, if I was you.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. Our last speaker is Mike Jenkins. Mike, are you with us?
Good evening.
Yes, good. You're here.
Thank you. My name is Michael Jenkins, and I'm a resident of Waverly. I'm also an educator who's not looking forward to wearing a mask while I teach, but I do understand that it's necessary for my safety and those around me. I have 2 children in elementary school, and they've never complained about their mask. And thankfully, no one in our family has had COVID. I'm grateful to the board and the administration for your thoughtfulness and thoroughness in considering the best option for our children. Your attentiveness over the past year and a half has been really appreciated. I think it's proven that maybe one of the reasons you're seeing and hearing strong support among the in-person unmasked crowd is because there are many of us who are at home within the safety of our own homes who are fully in support of a masking policy. To those parents concerned about the district's overreach into our lives, I'd remind them that the district already has plenty of oversight into the lives of families who choose to send their kids to our public schools. We get notices about going to the dentist. Students must abide by a dress code. We turn over our medical records. We receive mandatory vaccinations. Our children undergo hearing and vision tests during the school day. And if parents don't want to be subjected to these requirements, then they have the freedom to make other choices about how they educate their children. To those who would say this is 99% curable, I ask, which 1% of our students are you willing to sacrifice? Besides that, who among us wants our children in the pediatric ICU, potentially without the ability to visit them? While I could appreciate parents putting time into their own study of this issue, the board has the responsibility to take the best available information at the time a decision is to be made. That information should come from the experts and authorities, not from the well-intentioned and passionate few. You're not expected to be virologists and epidemiologists. You have a choice to make, and given the current best guidance, the choice is quite clear. As the CDC, AAP, and other authorities make clear, a mandatory mask policy must be in place to ensure our children have the best possible chance at having an in-person and safe education this year. I hope you will make that the policy for our students in this great district.
Okay, very good. I know everyone was very passionate and spoke from the heart tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time to come and share your voices for people online as well. And I know that this board works very hard to make the best decisions for the health of and safety and welfare of our children. Somebody said they didn't hear us speak of that. I'm sorry that I did hear us speak of that. It's at the center of every decision we make. So I know everyone's listening and hears your voice, but we have to do what we think is best, and everyone will make their own decision tonight. I don't know if anybody else has any comments. Nope. Be good. Okay.
Should have read through it once.
What?
Should have read through it once.
Okay, at this time, I would like to request a motion to approve the bills.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Medensky, may we have the treasurer's report?
Yes, you may. We started the month of July off with $15,246,277. We had monthly revenues of $840,895, which gave us a cash available of $16,087,173. We had net disbursements of $3,766,780, which leaves us a cash balance moving forward of $12,320,392.
Okay, we have a motion to approve
So moved.
Second.
on the question? Roll call?
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mrs. Brashalski.
Yes.
9-0.
Hey, Dr. Mann, we usually ask you to ask for the personnel report. Would you like me to read the first one? Oh, okay, well, that. Yeah, okay. Okay, you can do that.
we would request the board to approve those individuals listed in letters A and B.
So moved. Second.
On the question?
I just want to make a comment. I got on the board, I believe, a year after Dr. Mahan was settled here. And it's been an honor and a privilege to have his leadership at Abington Heights. And I just wish him well and his family well in his new endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, and I would second that. It is certainly a loss to our district, and Southern Lehigh is very fortunate to have you, as another gentleman mentioned. So wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Roll call?
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
And under resignations, we ask the board to approve individuals listed in A through C.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
And under leave of absence, we ask the board to approve the individual listed in letter A.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
And maybe we could take all the appointments together. Request the board to approve those individuals listed under letters A through D, under non-certificated A through C, and EDRs A and B.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
I want to thank the board and the administrators and even our students for their long hours put into the hiring process and the many, many hours you spent here in this room in support of that effort. So thank you. We've hired some really, really great people. Under D, I request the board to approve the new story tuition agreement as contained in item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
And we will consider a motion authorizing the superintendent to implement temporary emergency measures related to COVID, including the closure of school buildings and the provision of alternate forms of instruction during the 2021-2022 school year as contained in item number 2.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
Under letter F, we request the board to approve the NEIU Student Assistance Program Letter of Agreement for the 21-22 school year as contained in item number 3.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
Request the board to approve the Lackawanna County Head Start Memorandum of Understanding for the 2021-2022 school year as contained in item number 4.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
9-0.
And we request the board to consider a motion to approve the Healthcare Career Pathway Cooperation Agreement between Lackawanna College and Abington Heights School District as contained in item number 5.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
This is a great program. I'm just very pleased that we have this opportunity for our students.
Yes, we're building upon an already strong partnership with Lackawanna College to provide opportunity for our students.
I have a question. Is this going to be referral based or student interest driven?
It would be student interest, and we certainly hope we wouldn't have to limit any spaces, but if it's overly subscribed, then, we would have to come up with some methodology, but we certainly now hope that as many students who want to participate will be able to do so.
And are incoming students aware of the opportunity for this school year?
Once we're fortunate and hopefully have the board approve it, then tomorrow the word will be out.
Roll call?
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski,
Yes.
9-0.
And we request the board to approve the Children's Service Center's partial hospitalization program, therapeutic educational program, and HIPAA confidentiality document as contained in item number 6.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski,
Yes.
9-0.
And under letter J, we request the board to approve the repository property sale as provided by the Lackawanna County Tax Claim Bureau as contained in item number 7.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski,
Yes.
9-0.
And under letter K, consider a motion to enter into an agreement with Templeton Advantage LLC for the purpose of conducting a superintendent search under the terms and conditions contained in item number 8.
So moved. Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, and as we noted earlier, we're going to ask the board to consider a motion to amend the Abington Heights School District Health and Safety Plan to mandate indoor masking in accord with related provisions in the plan.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
No.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Consider a motion to approve the sales proposal with Ring Central for the provision of electronic fax services as contained in item number 9.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Dr. Cadman.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski,
Yes.
9-0.
Under letter N, we request the board to approve the day habilitation agreement between Abington Heights School District and Keystone Community Resources as contained in item number 10.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Roll call?
Dr. Cadman,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mrs. Pusateri.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Pashowski.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, that
Concludes it,
concludes
yes.
our agenda. We have informational items. Is there any new business?
Mr. Berchalski, I do have just some new business. I heard that we had a good turnout for golf tryouts this week.
Oh,
So much so that there's interest in potentially, and I just throw it out there for maybe future discussions, about having a JV team, because there are a lot of, our golf team is very good, by the way. And I know that there are players that, you know, went out there, tried out, and they're good golfers, but they have no chance of making the team based on their score. And it seems like there's a lot of interest around, you know, having a feeder program like we do in other sports. It's very common. And I'd just like to have it for future discussions. I know it's a huge topic that we covered. I don't want to go back into that, but it was an increase of 50% from last year. So just a food for thought and for future discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Rosen, was that girls and boys?
The numbers that I saw that were very high were boys.
Do we know if other school districts have JV teams?
I asked the team that, so I don't know exactly who does and who doesn't.
I agree, Phil. It's worth discussion. Thanks.
We have exceptional athletes through this district who would be #1 starters in many other places, but it's a very hard situation. So it's the downside of the athletic success that our families and students achieve. Very serious. It's an issue. Definition.
And I just want to reiterate our motion to require the masking will always be evaluated. It is not a forever mandate. It is not, just as we reversed our optional one because the numbers started climbing. If the numbers start going down again and we start feeling, we will change course. So we will continue to monitor it.
We will continue. How are you going to handle mask exemption letters from lawyers, doctors?
I have no.
My physician's going to write a note, so that will be honored.
We will.
Well, you got to know.
Well, I don't know that answer to how that will happen, how that'll be addressed. That'll be administration's. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.